This is podcast of Slow Compounding. Through this podcast, we try to provide you real-time information that is sometimes clouded by market noise. We try to present valuable lessons that may help you to be a better investor. Hope you will enjoy listening to this podcast.
Hi guys, today we are going to talk about something extremely interesting. So when I came to know this concept for the first time, it was like a wow moment for me. Now, I'm just going to give you some very basics what we are going to discuss about it. Now, in this basically we are going to discuss about the book written by Pulak Prasad. The name of the book is What I Learned About Investing from Darwin. It's a phenomenal book. So I will just talk about the concept that has been laid in the chapter 1. Now, this podcast is going to be probably a little bit longer than the usual one that I typically post, but I'm very sure you'll find it very, very fascinating. Now, without having any further delay, let us start. We know a lot of rules, right? A lot of rules to live our life, a lot of rules to do certain activities. Now, for investing, we know Warren Buffett has laid out a lot of solid rules that if we follow, our investing career would be really, really good. But it is very difficult to follow those rules, right? So one of the things that Warren Buffett very, very often mentions is this. He says the rule number 1 of investing is never lose money. And the rule number 2 is don't forget the first rule. Now, this rule looks very simple, right? If we don't know the meaning why the rule has been set, it becomes extremely difficult to be loyal with the rules. So what this book does in its first chapter, this book gives a very fresh prospect. So now let's see what this book is explaining. So at first, the book explains there are 2 types of error. Now, this is not a concept adapted by the book. Now, this concept has already been there in statistics. Those who have studied statistics probably know that there are major two types of error. It is type 1 error and type 2 error. This is how it has been named. Now, let us understand this type 1 and type 2 error. Type 1 error, what is it? Type 1 error, this is what we do, but we should not be doing. That is your type 1 error. I'll repeat. What we do, but we should not do. That is your type 1 error. Now, let me give an example so that you can visualize this type 1 error very clearly. Let's say we all know that we should not be eating a lot of junk food, right? And even after knowing that, we all have it, right? So this is what we do, but we should not be doing. So this is your type 1 error. Now, if I draw the parallel of this in investing, how we can frame type 1 error? Probably some of you can think of it. We invest in a lot of business where we should not be investing. So that is your type 1 error. We are investing in some business where we are not supposed to be investing. Now, what is the type 2 error? Type 2 error is going to be completely flip side of that. What does it mean? It means what we don't do, which we are supposed to be doing. That means we should do it, but we are not doing. I'll give you an example so that you can understand these things very clearly. We all know that doing exercise is good and we should all do exercise, but we don't do that. That is your type 2 error. That means we should do, but we don't do. That is your type 2 error. So if I draw a parallel of type 2 error in investing, it should be in this way that we should invest in the business, but we are not investing. That means there are a lot of businesses that we should be investing, but we are not investing. That is your type 2 error. So to summarize, your type 1 error is simply we should not do, but we do. And your type 2 error, that is we don't do, but we should do. That is your type 1 and type 2 error. Now, why these 2 concepts we need to learn? Because from here, the things will get more and more interesting. Pay very close attention here. The premise of this 2 error is very nicely connected. How? If you want to minimize your type 1 error, your type 2 error get maximized. And the vice versa. That means if you want to minimize your type 2 error, your type 1 error get maximized. I will give you an example so that you can understand this concept much better way. Let's say you want to minimize your type 1 error. What does it mean? Your type 1 error, let's remember that. Type 1 error is where you are investing, but you should not be investing. This is the error. That means you should not invest, but you are investing. To minimize that, that means you don't invest where you should not invest. So in this case, what you can understand? You can understand that if you want to minimize your type 1 error, that means you don't want to invest where you should not invest. You have to let a lot of opportunity go, isn't it? So if you let a lot of opportunity go and you're not investing in that, that means in that whole pack of the opportunities, lot of investing opportunities you're letting it go, in that there would be certain businesses that are good, you should be investing, but actually you're not investing, which is your type 2 error. So if you want to minimize your type 1 error, the type 2 error actually maximize. Opposite is also true. If you want to minimize your type 2 error, that means you are not investing where you should be investing. If you want to minimize that, that means what? You should invest where you should invest. So that means you have to do this investment a lot more times. That means you have to invest in lot more businesses, right? And if you're investing in lot more businesses, in that whole pack, there would be a lot of businesses that is actually not good, but you're investing. That means that is your type 1 error. So we have to live with this concept that 2 error we cannot minimize at a time. If we want to minimize one, the other one will get increased. Now here comes the most important part. Which one we should live with? What should be our target? To minimize the type 1 error or minimize the type 2 error? This is very, very interesting. Now, in this part, the author Pulak Prasad actually draws some very, very basic understanding from evolution. So what has been seen, so if I just take this 2 error in the animal planet and try to understand what this 2 errors are, this is how easily it can be explained. Let's say in the type 1 error, a deer is thirsty in a jungle and it wants to drink water because it's thirsty, right? And it finds a water body, there's a very small water body in the jungle, and then it is about to go for drinking water. So in this case, what can happen is, so the deer is actually taking a decision. What is the decision? It may happen that it can just simply go and drink water and quench its thirst. There could be other possibility also. It could happen that the deer can be victimized. Probably a crocodile is waiting in the water body to trap him, or probably a lion or tiger could be just near around that. So when the deer is stopping, suddenly the tiger or the lion can attack. So the deer is considering this 2 probability, whether it should go for drinking water or not go for drinking water. I mean, he could be victimized. So in this case, I mean, this scenario can happen in a deer's life several times, right? Because drinking water, the deer has to do every day at least a couple of times. What happens is, maximum cases, like if it has been seen over its complete lifespan, then it could so happen that if a deer is neglecting the chance that there is no crocodile in the water body and it can just simply go and drink water, if this possibility is completely removed, then the deer will not care about anything and just simply go and drink water. But in this case, what can happen that more and more number of deers in a jungle will get killed. If more and more deers in the jungle gets killed, what happens is it cannot produce the next generation. It cannot pass on the gene to the next generation. And that simply means that this species will cease to exist with time. There will be a time where the entire species could go vanished. You can understand that there are chances of these 2 types of error. That means, let's say a deer is in front of a water body and there is actually a crocodile. In this case, let's say the deer is going to drink water, but it actually should not go. A deer is going to drink water, but actually it should not go. Which type of error it is? This is type 1 error. If a deer commits this type of type 1 error, that means it will have really tough time to survive over the long run. Coming to type 2, that means the deer don't do where it should be doing. So in this case, let's get into the same example. Let's say there is no trap, there is no crocodile, the deer should directly go and drink water and come. This is the type 2 error. But what happens is there would be some trap, some crocodile waiting for it. It actually don't go and drink water. This is your type 2 error. That means it doesn't do what it should be doing. So this is your type 2 error. Now in this type 2 error, what could be the maximum downside? The maximum downside is if a deer choose type 2 error to commit more and more number of times, what happens? The deer actually suffers for the thirst. But in no cases when a deer is committing type 2 error, it will cease to exist. It will not happen. So you can see type 1 error and type 2 error. So if a species has to survive in the long term, then it has to minimize the type 1 error. And when it is minimizing any type 1 error, what happens? The type 2 error will be maximized. And in this case, it is still possible to bear the pain, and then it will be beneficial for the long term for the deer. So this similar example, you can find it in many different places. Any species that has survived over long term, it has actually minimized the type 1 error, because if it does not minimize the type 1 error, it will not happen that over the long time the species will actually survive. So the way the evolution has taken place, it is the natural selection. This is how it has taken place. They have minimized the type 1 error, and in this whole process, the type 2 error has actually maximized, and still it is fine. It creates problem, it creates trouble for the short term, but in the long term it's beneficial. If we have understood this concept, type 1 error and type 2 error, now if we think it back, what Buffett has said, don't lose money. That's the rule number 1, and don't forget the first rule. Buffett is simply indicating that focus on minimizing type 1 error. That means what you are doing that you should not be doing. In this case, if you are investing, that means by saying this statement, Buffett is mentioning that we have to be very, very careful about not losing our money. That is the most critical part of surviving in the game. This is what Buffett has said many, many times over his annual meeting, that to survive in the game, you have to make sure that you don't lose the money. It's the same thing that we can see in evolution, that the author, the Pulak Prasad, has actually brought these things to our notice, that to survive in the game, we have to minimize the type 1 error. It's okay. It will be a part of the process that type 2 error will be there. So in this whole process, that if we just think that what can happen, like if we are adapting this principle in our investing journey, that means we try to minimize the type 1 error. That means there would be a lot of businesses, even if we sense a little bit of danger, little bit of chances of losing money. Maybe the company is highly levered, or the company is actually having really tough time because its competitor is going for a full-fledged competition with. So in this case, there are chances that a lot of money would be lost. When you sense that the losing possibility is much, in those cases, we have to let it go. Now, in this whole process, if we are letting all those dangerous or risky bets go, it may so happen out of all those risky asset or risky businesses, couple of businesses will turn out to be very profitable. We have seen that Tesla, which was fully levered, and there were a lot of debts for this company, and finally it has managed to come out of a very solid business plan. Its revenue is growing, its profitability is growing, and the share price, as you know, that how good it has done. So out of all those things, obviously the Tesla like of stock, you will miss it. And that is completely fine, because you have to live with the possibility that you're trying to minimize the type 1 error. That means you're trying to not invest in the company what you should not be doing. In this whole process, it would be part of the parcel that some of the good opportunity will be mixed here and you will miss it. And we have to live with this reality. And there is no other way to defy that. So this is what Sir Warren Buffett has repeatedly mentioned, that we should be focusing on not to lose capital. And in this book, what I learned about investing from Darwin, Pulak Prasad, who works in Nalanda Capital, is a PMS. In this book, beautifully the author has explained. So I would highly recommend you to read this book. All the chapters in this book are extremely insightful, and it contains very, very good lessons for the investor. Thank you for listening.